Hello, my name is Dr. Joseph Crumbley. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and family therapist, and I'll be presenting to you on the subject of guilt. This topic is one of a three-part course developed specifically for kinship caregivers, and the title of the course is Coping with the Unique Challenges of Kinship Care. You're now about to see a video clip of me presenting to an audience of caregivers in which I'll be addressing two questions. One, what are the cues and what are the sources of guilt experienced by caregivers? And number two, what are the goals, the approaches, and self-dialogues you need to have with yourself in order to manage and cope with the guilt? I have two questions for the viewing audience, and those questions are, does guilt impact my ability to provide permanency, well-being, and protection for the children in my care? And the second question is, what goals, approaches, and self-dialogues would be useful in monitoring and managing my feelings of guilt? So please sit back, relax, and I'll rejoin you at the conclusion of this videotape to summarize the presentation. Thank you. Guilt. One of the challenges for kinship caregivers is having to place the needs of the children before who? The birth parents. Now let me ask you a question. Your first relationships, your first interactions as a family member were with whom first? The child in your care or the child's birth parents? The birth parents, exactly. Your initial feelings of attachment and loyalty and trust were with whom first? Y'all already know, I didn't even have to finish the question. Right, exactly. It's going to be with the birth parent. A foster parent who's not related, their initial attachments and interactions and relationships are going to be with who first? The child, exactly. Their feelings of commitment, their feelings of protection are going to be with who first? The child. So for the foster parent, it's a no-brainer. The needs of the children should take precedent to those of who? The birth parents. It's a no-brainer. You as relative caregivers, you know that too. The needs of the children should take precedent to those of the birth parent. But it becomes harder for you when that birth parent is related to you as a what? Your child, your son, your daughter, your sister, your brother, your cousin. That becomes hard. My question to you now is, when you have to put the needs of the children before the birth parent, and those needs conflict with the birth parent, how does that make you feel? Guilty? Angry? Anything else? Disappointed. Hurt? I remember you said that too. I can see your face and see it. Okay, I guess I just read it. What else? Jealous. Okay, how about that? Overwhelmed. Yes, sir. Who said that? Excellent. Powerless. That's perfect. Yeah, those are the feelings that you can have when you're placing the needs of the children over that of the birth parents. Now, how does the birth parent feel when you place those children's needs over them? What do y'all get? Resentful, jealous, angry, rejected, abandoned. Yeah, they're going to feel all those things. Why? Birth parents feel as though they deserve the same love that you gave them, the same loyalty that you gave them, the same trust that you gave them before that child was placed with you. In fact, they feel as though you should have the same loyalty and attachment to them before that child was even what? Born. That's how far they go back. So when you don't give it to them, and it's not that they're being mean or evil, okay, but they've gotten used to you knowing them what? First. So they expect that. Caregivers also feel as though that they should be also caring for that birth parent, because that is who? Your what? Your child, your brother, your sister, your daughter. And because of that pre-existing relationship before the child was placed with you, before the child was born, you feel as though you should do what? Continue it. Okay. So that's why you can have those mixed feelings. Even though intellectually you know what's right, but emotionally you can feel that. For a foster parent that's not related, they're not going to feel that. There was no pre-existing relationship with that who? Birth parent. So there's no reason for them to feel that guilt. So some of the sources of your guilt are also going to be being more successful with the child than with the birth parents. Your success makes who look bad? Yeah, weight has gone up, the children are going to school, they're doing better. So yeah, your success can make the birth parent be intimidated and feel jealous. The children can also develop a greater affinity for you as a caregiver than to the birth parent. In other words, they start calling you what? Mom. And even though that birth parent knows it's for the best, they can still be hurt, and they can still tell you that I'm still what? The mother. I'm still the parent. Another source of guilt for you might be being a better parent to the child than to who? The birth parent. But that's what makes kinship care work. You are better the second time around. And you can't help it. And who reminds you of the fact that you're better the second time around? The birth parents. And they don't mean it as a compliment either, okay? Because they're jealous, right? All right? But you are better the second time around. That's what makes kinship care work, okay? So it's important that you accept it, that you know what's going to happen, because now we've got to figure out what are the cues that are going to let you know that you're feeling it. And these are the cues that are going to let you know that you might be feeling guilt, because it's important for you to anticipate the triggers. If you hear yourself saying things like, is what's happening to my son or daughter my fault? You might be feeling some guilt. If you're saying things like, I can't blame my daughter for not wanting her child to live with me because of my past, maybe you're feeling guilty about your past. Is taking this child going to come between me and my son and my daughter or my sister? It's about feeling guilty because you're now placing the needs of the children over that of the birth parent. Did my mistakes as a parent cause my child to turn out the way they did? He blames me for taking his child and believes that I always wanted to take the child because I didn't feel as though he or she was good enough to care for the child. So these become sources of the guilt. So what do you do about it? First thing you have to do is learn how to live with the guilt. Accept your past, live with the past, but not in the past. That's your goal. The second thing is to forgive yourself. You cannot wait for the birth parent to forgive you. You can't even wait for your own children to forgive you. In their 20s, they're blaming you for everything that's wrong. In their 30s, they're starting to make mistakes. By the time they get 40, they start to realize that maybe these mistakes are because of choices and decisions I made. But by the time they're 40, you are now how old? 60. So you can't wait for them to forgive you. You have to be able to forgive yourself. And the third goal, which is identifying those triggers. By triggers, I'm talking about what are the buttons that the birth parent can push that can make me feel like I owe them and that can make me feel guilty. And then you've got to come up with a response that's going to stop you from being manipulated so that you can protect who? The child. Here's my question to you. If a person feels guilty, they then feel as though they deserve to be what? Punished. If a person feels as though that they've done their time, that they've been punished, they're therefore going to protect themselves from not being punished any longer. When a caregiver feels as though they've done something wrong and they're feeling guilty, they are vulnerable to being punished by whom? The birth parent. When a caregiver feels as though I've made up for those mistakes and I don't owe you, they're then going to feel as though that they no longer deserve to be punished by whom? The birth parent, which means you're going to be able to set limits with who? Thank you. If you can protect yourself from being abused or mistreated by the birth parent, you're then going to be able to protect who else? So you have to know what your guilt is, what your triggers are, how to protect yourself so that you can now protect the child. So here's some triggers that you need to look out for. Some of these triggers are going to be about making you blame yourself. We've got a set of triggers here that are going to cause you to have self-blame, and the triggers sound like this. How can you live with yourself knowing what you did? You can never make up for what you did in the past, and I'm not going to let you forget about it. So your goal is to stop blaming yourself. So you need to have this kind of a conversation with yourself. Yeah, I may have caused some of the problems that you're having. Yeah, I may be partially to blame for the situation you're in, but guess what? I can admit it. I can admit what I did and take responsibilities for it. I've tried to make up for it. I've tried to make amends. I don't make excuses for what I did. I'm not blaming anybody for what they did. And guess what? I've also learned from the past so I can do things differently now and do things differently for who? The child in your care. That's why you've earned the right to move on. You've got some triggers that are going to make you doubt yourself and your ability to be a caregiver. And those triggers sound like this. You may have everyone else fooled, but I know you haven't changed. You're not any different now than you were in the past. When you think that, when you hear it, your conversations need to sound like this. I'm not the same person now that I was then. Look at how I'm different now, and I can prove it, because it's the proof that's important. It's being able to prove to who? And to who else? And to who else? There you go. Right. The proof is to yourself, because these conversations are to yourself. And you can prove it because you can say, I'm recovered now. I'm not using. I'm responsible for myself. I'm independent. I'm no longer abusive to you or anyone else. And I've come, so what? Yeah, you've got to include that. But that means you have to go back and remember where you came from. And that may mean going back and remember the mistakes and the choices. But you see, you need to go back to that so that you won't be afraid of what? Your past. And you won't be afraid of somebody bringing up the past and using it against you. So you go back to the past. Don't forget it. Use it. When you know someone's using it to shame you, you use it as a testament. Because going back to the past allows you to look at where you came from, what you did. It makes you appreciate your strength, makes you appreciate your resilience, so that you can move on. So you have to go back to your past so you don't have to be afraid of your past being used against you. There are a set of triggers that make you feel as though you are unforgivable. Triggers sound like this. I'll never forgive or trust you regardless of what you do now. I'll never forget what you did or let anybody else forget about your past. When you hear that, your conversation needs to be, I've earned the right to forgive myself because I'm sacrificing for who? And who else? And who else? The birth parent. I've earned the right to forgive myself because I'm giving you the opportunity to get yourself together. I've earned the right to forgive myself because I'm giving you the opportunity to get your child back. I've earned the right to forgive myself because I'm now a better parent than I was in the past, because I'm better now the second time when? There you go. Around. And here's another set of triggers. And these triggers make you feel guilty because the children are starting to call you what? Mom. And the triggers sound like this. Stop trying to replace me. I'm still mom. I'm still dad. You want the children to love me more than they love. You want the children to love you more than they love me. So here's your conversation with yourself. You need to have what I call if not, then what conversations with yourself. Somebody's got to go to the IEP meeting. You can. So if not me, then who? Somebody's got to be there for the children at the parent-teachers' nights. You can. So if not me, then who? Somebody's got to go to that intake and get the children ready for the pediatricians. You can. So if not me, then who? Then you also need to have what I call if not now, then when conversations. I've got to get the children ready for kindergarten, but they've got to go to pre-K. So if I don't get them ready for pre-K, if not now, then when? I've got to start this child getting ready to walk. So in order for them to start being able to walk, I've got to get on the floor and crawl with them. That's called attachment, y'all, and bonding. If not you, then who? If not now, then what? When? So placing the needs of the children before the birth parents may cause you to feel feelings of guilt. Being more successful than the birth parent can cause you to feel guilty. Children start calling you mom, dad, pop, may cause you to feel guilty. But if not you, then who? That becomes the question. And it's important also to realize that you have to know your guilt triggers. What are the buttons that are going to make you feel guilty? Because we all have buttons. We all have buttons. We all have regrets. Is it going to be you were a single parent? Is it going to be because you had the children too young? Is it because you didn't leave that man when you should have? Or is it because you were incarcerated? Is it because of drugs and alcohol? What are the triggers going to be that can be used and pushed? And then you've got to come up with, how am I going to handle it? How am I going to live with it? How am I going to forgive myself? What am I going to do so it doesn't get thrown up in my face? You've got to come up with that plan, because in kinship care, you have to first protect yourself from being misused and abused by whom? The birth parents. In order for you to protect who? You see how it all ties in? You've got to be able to protect yourself first before you can protect the child. That's called safety planning in kinship care. You want to do safety planning for children in kinship care? You need to do safety planning with caregivers first, because you have to be okay for the children to be okay. Make sense? Okay. All right, well, thank you so much. And it's been a real pleasure. Safe travels, and continue doing the great work that you're doing. Thank you. Welcome back. In summary, there's several sources of guilt that caregivers might experience. The sources might be: one, having to place the needs of the children before that of the birth parent. Number two, you being more successful with the children than the birth parents. Number three, the children becoming more attached to you than to their birth parents, and they start calling you mom or dad. And number four, being a better parent to the child than you were to the birth parent. So those might be some of the four sources that you might experience. What do you do about it? How do you manage it? Number one, you have to be able to forgive yourself. And that means being able to accept what you did in the past and being able to learn from it. You also have to be able to validate your own growth. That means being able to deal with the self-doubt that you might have about whether or not you can or can't be a caregiver. Managing your self-blame so that you don't feel like you're at fault for being a caregiver, or that you're at fault for the problems that the birth parent is having. And also embracing those new roles that you have of being a parent and being a replacement for that birth parent. So being able to live with those feelings. The most essential thing that I think you have to do, though, is being able to recognize your triggers. What are the things in your past that you've done? What are the buttons that can be pushed to make you feel guilty? That's the first thing. Is it going to be because you got married too young? Is it going to be because you had children too early? Is it going to be because you were a single parent? What is that issue that's going to push the button to make you feel guilty? And number two, making sure you have a response so that you can manage that guilt. And by manage, I'm talking about making sure you're not doing things to make up for that past that might jeopardize the safety for the children that you're caring for. You need to have safety plans in place. What are you going to do when that birth parent shows up? Hi. And that birth parent is saying to you, come on, you can deal with this. We're what? Family, What are you going to do when they say, hey, I need a place to stay. Let me come over. You knew me what? First. You've got to have a safety plan in place when that's happening, So safety planning for your children starts with safety planning for yourself first. Safety planning for your children means having those plans in place when you're feeling pressured. So in closing, safety planning starts with you. You have to be able to protect yourself from being misused or abused or manipulated in order for you to protect the child. So I hope you find this useful. Thank you, and continue the great work that you're doing already. Thank you.